Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to EIG's first in a series of webinars with the IALS group and the founder of EnRoute.io. We're focusing today on how to capitalize on your mistakes, empowering root cause failure analysis to prevent future losses. Again, my name is Jim Vries. Welcome to the first in a series of webinars. And with us again is Dr. Irene Legiec, founder and CEO of IALS Consulting, Aaron Parr, founder of EnRoute, and I am Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group. We appreciate you joining us today. There'll be a lot of time for questions and answers by this esteemed panel we have today. And the webinar will be online within a week. And you can see the rest of our 110 webinars up there also. So we always encourage you to join us on the webinars and participate, as well as participate in the webinar itself. So this webinar is the first in the series. The second one will be on engage your employees to alleviate operational pains and reduce risks. The third webinar will focus on the tools and root cause failure analysis. And our fourth webinar will be getting into the digital AI ML impact. So how can we use AI and machine learning to help this area out? Again, we'll be focusing today on root cause failure analysis in these areas. First, we're going to be looking at the benefits of root cause failure analysis for your business. Then we'll be getting into the simplified strategy, then into best practices and examples, and then an introduction of the collaboration tools from EnRoute. So we're really happy that you've joined us today, and we're excited about receiving your input throughout the webinar. Our overall focus is surfacing the root causes that fortify your P&L for preventable risk events. So at the end of the day, we all have these risk events happening, to some to a greater degree and sometimes to a lesser degree. And we want to make sure that we use those key learnings to help us move forward. With that, we'll do some introductions. Irene?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that you're able to join us. My name is Irene Legiec, and I am the founder of IALS Consulting, Improvement and Lean Services Consulting. We work in 6 different areas that you can see there. Continuous improvement, doing a lot of training and mentoring, operational excellence, as well as a variety of program managements for leadership. I have over 30 years of experience, 27 of them in DuPont in various roles, my last role being global leader of process safety management and fire protection. I had the opportunity to be in Covanta, which is now Reworld, to lead engineering organizations as well as continuous improvement for one of their largest regions. And then I ran a business in Air Liquide for renewable natural gas. So bringing a lot of this experience to the table to help clients.
Thanks, Irene. And Aaron?
First, Jim, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about RCAs today. A little bit about myself. I have a background in chemical engineering and Lean Six Sigma. I've spent most of my career in sustainable energy technologies before leaving the corporate world this year to found enroute.io, where we're focused on empowering remote operations to drive continuous improvement. Our overall goal is to develop a data-driven co-pilot for superior problem solving. And the first way we plan to do that is by automating RCA pre-work. Right now, we have 3 main offerings. The first of which is mentoring. So we offer training for facilitators to quickly get up to speed on how to facilitate RCA events and Kaizen events. Our second offering and most popular is EnRoute cause analysis software. If you go to our website, enroute.io, that's currently what's hosted on our website. That automates RCA pre-work, helps identify biases by using a layer of technology, and prevents incorrect root cause identification. Our third offering is kind of a tailored version of that second offering for large enterprises. So we will tailor those software solutions to fit a larger company's unique needs, whether that's integration into quality and safety systems, IT systems, or other business process systems.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. With that, just a brief overview about EIG. We're a group of over 60 companies throughout the world, delivering self-sustaining growth. Aaron and Irene are part of that 60 member group. And we focus on people, process, data, technology, linking strategy to execution. This week, we're focusing on how to make risk a priority in your company and driving visibility of these risks to create action plans that are proactive instead of reactive. You're welcome to look at our EIG website that has our webinars as well as our education and our services. With that, we'll get moving on to the agenda today. And we're going to kick it off with looking at the financial impact of these root cause failure analysis events, these catastrophic events. We're going to get into that. Then we're going to get into the challenges in implementing RCFA, and then we'll get into the definition and best practices. And we have some case studies to look at to show some root cause analysis. And then Aaron will get into the digital collaboration tools and how to make getting to a root cause much easier, and making sure that it's documented well. And then we'll get into what everybody wants to talk about is how do you document this, and then looking at the cost avoidance versus the event impact. With that, we're going to kick it off with the financial impact, and we're going to take some key learnings from some folks that have kind of been around the block, so to speak. We'll start off with my old-time favorite, Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And, failure is part of discovery. Each setback is an opportunity to refine understanding and edge closer to success, just as Edison did in developing the light bulb. Classic. The next is Lucy Maud Montgomery. Her quote is, "We should regret our mistakes and learn from them, but never carry them forward into the future with us." Very wise from Lucy. And she's emphasizing mistakes should inform our future actions, but not burden us. In root cause analysis, learning from mistakes is crucial, but dwelling on them just hinders progress. Our third one is somebody that I think everybody knows, Mr. Bill Gates. Learning from mistakes and constantly improving products is the key to all successful companies. And what he's getting at is the success, the way we look at it, is the success in RCA hinges on learning from mistakes and driving continuous improvement. So he was into that continuous improvement very early on. Each failure should inform and improve processes, creating a cycle of innovation. Next, we have Marie Curie. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we would fear less. So we may fear less. Curiosity dispels fear. We all know that. Understanding failures at their most root empowers teams to tackle challenges with clarity and confidence, reducing the fear of failure. And our last great is Leon Brown. And his quote is, "Mistakes are the stepping stones to wisdom. We learn from trial and error, and we become wise by understanding problems." So simple, but so true. Mistakes are our stepping stone stories to wisdom. RCA is about using the trial and error to gain deeper insights, transforming errors into strategic opportunities of growth. So some very wise ways to look at RCA over the years. With that, I'll turn it over to Aaron. Aaron?
Great. I wanted to dig a little bit into some data on U.S. annual losses due to unplanned downtime. This is from a study done by Siemens of 72 large companies in different industries. The first thing you'll notice is FMCG and CPG, which is a subsector of manufacturing, is significantly smaller than oil and gas or automotive. The main thing I wanted to point out on this slide is that even though it's a lot smaller, it's $0 to $10 million. Typically, those businesses are $20 to $30 million businesses, whereas that automotive business could be a $500 million business. So $5 million of a $20 million business is still enough to make or break your company. So unplanned downtime is significant no matter what industry you're in. Moving on, same study. Now we're looking at the cost of downtime per day by the same industry groups. The automotive industry has the highest costs of downtime. It's nearly 200 times that of the typical manufacturing. And to a lesser extent, we see a similar trend with oil and gas. It's nearly 40 times that of manufacturing. I think there's a couple factors that go into why there's such a difference by industry for cost of downtime. If you think about plant structure, workflow type, you have really complex supply chains and really, really detailed one-piece flow in automotive industry. So a disruption there, unplanned downtime of any piece of that process could grind that plant to a screeching halt. Whereas manufacturing, you might have the ability to kind of reallocate resources while you get that piece of machinery up and running. The next graph is a very different trend. It illustrates the average downtime hours. So we're looking at time, not cost now, each month for a plant. So despite cost differences, most industries actually experience similar downtime durations. I think the important takeaway from both of these graphs is how important it is to know your business's true cost of downtime. It looks like on average, everyone's experiencing about 20 to 24 hours a month. It's about a day of downtime. But that cost is significantly different. So it's super important to know your cost of downtime per day, and the details of, if there's downtime in this equipment versus that equipment, what does that impact look like on your P&L?
Thanks, Aaron. I think we got a question in the chat. Thank you. It says, they say, why do you think plants have an average about the same amount of unscheduled downtime regardless of industry?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think the main reason is that it's probably the nature of averaging. So this is the average for each industry, which means we're looking at the middle of the road, right? I think that regardless of industry, on average, you're experiencing a lot of the same issues, and we have a lot of the same reactions to address those issues. I'd imagine if you looked at the top 1% or top 5% of plants performing in each of these industries, it'd be a very different story. I would imagine that the downtime would be directly related to what their actual cost of downtime is.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
Thank you.
So if you think about it, the safety impact, especially in the chemical industry, has been life-threatening. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the chemical industry just in terms of those statistics. By nature of the beast, I grew up in the chemical manufacturing industry. If you think about it, chemical process safety incidents, unplanned downtime, quality incidents can really impact personnel, the local communities, environment, and the business. And even with all the work that we have done in the last 20 odd years, there's still roughly 150 chemical process safety incidents annually in the United States. Think about the impact on people. The workplace injuries cost alone is $167 billion, okay? And that's including the medical fees, administration fees, but still, we're hurting people unnecessarily. From a pure business sense, If there's a small supply chain disruption of 30 days or less, that impacts your EBITDA by 3 to 5%, while a long-term disruption is upwards of 30 to 50% of your annual EBITDA. So a long-term disruption can impact or close a business. So, running this process and conducting that thorough root cause failure analysis is not only the right thing to do to protect people and the environment, it makes really good business sense as well to keep your businesses going. This is an interesting, so this is just from January 2021 through today, the chemical industry safety incidents in the United States. And this is where the locations are. It's everywhere where there's people or manufacturing. One thing to note is that only a small fraction of those are in the blue circles, are at a facility that's covered by EPA's risk management plan. So some of the smaller sites that are not under the EPA's RMP plan are also having some pretty significant safety incidents. If you will go. And so these align with population centers. So in a lot of the areas where there's a gap, there's really not that many people there. But look how heavy it is on the East Coast. I grew up in northern New Jersey, where you'll have manufacturing sites adjacent to schools, neighborhoods. So it's really, really critical, especially if you're in a larger population area, to get it right.
So we do have a question coming in here, Irene.
Yep.
They're asking, since you've been in the chemical industry, for the last 30 years or so, how did the plant facilities look to you when you walk through them today versus 20, 30 years ago? Have there been appreciable changes in the work environment over those 30 years?
So it's a mixed bag, but for the most part, there has been improvement. So first of all, the understanding process safety management and the depth of process safety management, especially in the chemical manufacturing industry, has been greatly increased and improved. There's a lot more technology out there. There's a lot more classes. The AICHE, American Institute for Chemical Engineers, has a Center for Chemical Process Safety that is constantly developing coursework and in-depth coursework to have people trained in this methodology. There's definitely an increased awareness using some of the modeling tools for fume releases to explosions and understanding those pressure waves. And then more importantly, there are definitely improvements in process technology and the use of process controls technology. And now coming up is more the use of AI, predictive tools to help us. That being said, we still have quite a lot of work to go in some of the other manufacturing sites that haven't had the opportunity to upgrade. And so you still have to have your vigilance.
There's a follow-up question on that. Is the safety engineer role, has it changed much in the last 10, 20 years? Is it more prestigious, less prestigious role? Is it respected more or less than it used to be?
I think it's respected more because a lot of companies are understanding that that person is a key leader in their right to operate. They are the expert in understanding the OSHA regulations. They are the expert in understanding a lot of the exposure pathways and how to prepare them. And typically in running a process hazards analysis, your engineers running it, your scientists running it, but your EHS resource, your safety engineer, your environmental engineers, they need to be part of it. They are a mandatory checkoff to make sure that they approve of the technology package. And so that, to me, I think is an improvement in the recognition of these experts, as well as understanding that they are indeed very critical technical experts in their field.
Thanks so much, Irene.
Okay, so this is just gives you an idea. I talked a little bit about the chemical manufacturing sites. Well, this is just the transportation sites. How are we getting our products from point A to point B? And you'll see that even through the years, you think it's getting better, but there has been an increase in the incident rate throughout the years. And you can see the impact in the little table there in terms of the mode of transportation, what the grand total is. Highways, it's $500 million impact. Railways, 240. So it is a pretty significant impact just over the last 10 years in terms of the financial impact to the United States. You take a look at this increase and you're trying to figure out why. Well, in 2016, there was a decrease in regulatory requirements in transportation, which had an impact. You can't take your foot off the gas here. There is a step change in volumes in oil and gas production. And then you see in 2020, we started putting some measures back in place and it's starting to correct itself. The other thing that's really, really important is aging infrastructure. That's being addressed through the IRA. And so that's another critical act that has been enacted to protect the United States that we need to keep going.
Very insightful, Irene. Thank you so much. With that, we just wanted to summarize a little bit here and state the business challenge overall. And, with technologies available now, with AI tools and remote sensing technology, how can we prevent the loss of life? I mean, that's the bottom line of all this. And we all know that most, if not all, incidents are preventable. And what do we need to do now for your business? What actions do we need to take now? This is the major challenge that we have, that we keep coming back to. And after a major incident in any company, you sit down at the board meeting and you have this conversation again and again and again and again. So this is something that is pervasive in the industries, all industries, and there are ways to help address this, and that's what this is all about for us. We have a very strong passion of curbing this and providing those tools on how to address the challenges in implementing root cause failure analysis. With that, Irene, back to you.
All right, sorry about that. So if we think about it, all of us have experienced, those of us who have participated in or led a root cause failure analysis or an incident investigation, trying to find out why, we have all experienced some of these challenges. So the first challenge is the meeting turns from the 5 whys to the 5 blames. People want to find out who's the person that, forgot to do something. It's all their fault. It's the easy way out. You punish that person in the corner and we're done. That is one, incorrect. It ruins a company culture. It decreases morale, but you're still not getting to the root cause of your problem. If you stop at the blaming somebody's face, you did not go deep enough into your why tree. So part of the solutions is to make sure you have that company culture established that you want to prevent future incidents. So the whole idea is when you go into a room, people understand that we're not here to blame somebody. We're here to find out what happened so it never happens again. We also want to make sure that the why tree is done thoroughly. If it is ever a human error issue, that's when you're getting into purposeful sabotage. More often than not, that's not the case, is we're not setting people up for success. Lack of critical data for team to review. People want to hurry up and get this done. And say, I'll meet and say, okay, let's talk about it. And you forgot to gather the key data. It's just, the CSI or NCIS. We all watch those shows. I know I'm addicted. You have to gather the data, gather the facts before the meeting, pull up your trends from the computer, go out and take pictures, get some witness reports, just so that you have that to look at. A lack of leadership support. People will sit there and do a lot of hard work, and they're not going to get any recognition for their hard work, or the leader just kind of blows it off. And that is that sets the stage for the entire company culture. You have to establish that company culture where leaders not only support, drive, and model those safety behaviors, but for some of those more critical events, they need to be at the incident investigation participating. Lack of follow-up to action. So you did a really, really great Y tree. You found out what's happening, and then you said, okay, we're going to do all this stuff, and then it withers on the vine. You can't do that. You have to make sure your action items are complete and you verified that it was implemented effectively. Make sure that did it work. You don't have a complete team for the incident investigation. It's you and this guy Bob in a conference room. That's not going to work. You have to have all key team members are present. This is critical, and some of them may not be at the site. And so later on in the conversation, Aaron's going to talk about some ways to have people who are remote subject matter experts participate. And that was, exactly what I want to talk about here. You have to have them participate. Can you fly out your metallurgist to every single incident investigation? Probably not, but you can have them participate and actively participate versus, sit in a death by PowerPoint presentation in the meeting. A lot of times we start the work after the team meeting. You want to make sure that the work is done beforehand. You got to gather the facts. This is critical. And again, it goes up with the above line there. It's gather the key data and gather the facts before the meeting. Do your homework first.
Do we have a question in the chat? Is there a challenge in the lack or agreed definition of the problem at the start of the process? Does that ever come up?
Mark, that's a great question. So yes, and so in the next webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about the 5W2H process, which is what is that problem statement? And so everyone really has to have that agreement on what the problem statement is at the beginning of the meeting or as part of the pre-work. You don't want to just say, well, something broke. Well, something broke on this Tuesday. It happened twice before, and this is what we observed, and this is the cost and the impact. That has a little more information than just something broke. So you're absolutely right.
Thanks, Irene. With that, we'll just move on to the next section. And before we do that, I'll leave you one quote here.
One more. So if you take a look at that that box there in the VA New York Harbor healthcare system, they found that only 39% of their actions were fully implemented. And then of those that are implemented, 74% were effective. Okay, so remember that one line item, make sure that the action items are complete and verified as implemented effectively. It's absolutely critical. The data is out there. People are not following through. You have to follow through.
Thanks, Irene. Very insightful. With that, we'll get into some definition and best practices. Back to you, Irene.
Okay, so first things first, an incident occurs. And I'm going to use a safety example, but we can all use a process safety management. We could use a reliability, or if you're in a customer-facing industry, you got a customer complaint, a massive customer complaint, or there's a quality issue. So first things first, stabilize the scene, whether it's corporate communications, taking care of the customer, taking care of people, make sure things are safe. Do not clean up the evidence right away. Take pictures, video, if possible. Just so that you gather that. Obviously, if something's gushing out of a tank, take care of that. But you stabilize the scene. Next. And so you see the graphic there that it's kind of a windy road. It really is. So first things first is if you have some mandatory communications by state, federal, corporate guidelines, you got to get that done. You don't want your leadership to be surprised. You don't want the agencies to be surprised about something. You want to be proactive in communicating. This is, while it's a small step, it's a very critical first step. Establish your incident investigation team. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then you gather your preliminary data. This is doing your homework. So if it was a process incident, what did the trends look like? What was the last maintenance records of that piece of the process? What did the operators observe? Those operators are the eyes and ears of the organization, and they might have witnessed something really important. Gather the facts. So Mark, here's where we talk about that 5W2H process. Develop the problem statement. 5W2H is the what, where, why, etc., how often process. And this helps you really get enough information into the problem. And a well-defined problem statement is half the battle in doing a Y tree. You want to organize the facts. So don't just have like a literal dump of data on a slide. Really organize it. Get, your pictures together, understand the equipment assessments, get the data from the historian, have the eyewitness interview. So spend a little time doing your pre-work so that this way, when you walk into the incident investigation meeting, you're well prepared and it runs smoothly. You want to then conduct your root cause analysis. That's where you're getting into the meat of the process and conducting your Y tree. And then from there, you develop and define corrective actions. So most of us heard of SMART goals, which are, you want to be measurable, sustainable, actionable, realistic, have a time frame available. You want them to be you want them to be very crisp. You want to refine those, make sure they're implemented. And then next, you want to assign them using the SMART objectives. So don't just say, hey, we're going to fix this. You're going to assign it to an individual. Hopefully let the individual know that was assigned to them if they were not in the meeting, and have them understand why it's so important. Give them the background information. And then really report out your recommendations, report it to leadership, and then follow up for verification of effectiveness. So if it's a major incident, you're going to have a bi-weekly follow-up just to make sure, hey, did it get implemented? What help do you need? So that this way, you have reduced the frequency of those incidents happening again.
So Irene, we got a question coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Although this says it's a streamlined set of steps, they're saying, do we really need all these steps?
You do. Now, the thing is some of these are not as time consuming as others, but there's a process of steps that, let's say you got to go to the grocery store. There's a process of steps that you got to take in order to go to the grocery store. This is the same way. The ones highlighted in the blue text are really the ones that are the more time consuming activities. And those are the meat of the process. And using some of the tools that Aaron and others are developing, that can help streamline it further. So team members, having your team is critical. Having a thorough team of subject matter experts is critical because you want them to be cross-functional. That diversity of role, diversity of thought is going to be critical in the problem-solving process. So first things first, you have your facilitator. Having someone who understands how to run this process and is a little bit separate from what happened is critical because they can oversee the old process and make sure you're staying on track. Again, remember we had that question about the environmental health and safety officer or your quality manager if it's a quality incident. They are a critical person in this organization and they need to be involved. Operations, if this happened out in operations, your first line supervisor, your operators, if it's a quality issue, your lab technicians who are doing the quality analysis, they need to be involved. Supervision, and this is key because it can't just be the technical people in the organization, that first line supervisor, the area manager. If it's a customer complaint and you have a sales and marketing person, that's fielding all those customer complaints, you want them to be present because they can represent their voice. Okay, we talked about the subject matter experts from the region or corporate. If you need a metallurgist, are you going to fly them in every single time? Probably not. You can't afford it. But you need to have them involved. And then incident witnesses. These are the people actually see it happen. What was happening right before the process? And again, so some of these folks will not be located at the facility. In my last organization, some of my plants only had 5 people or less, and we couldn't fly everyone in every single time. So what we did was we arranged for collaboration tools so that they could participate online and with video engagement as well. So you need to arrange travel or you need to use collaboration tools to ensure a thorough process. I will tell a little story. We ran a incident on a fire that occurred at one of the plants on the West Coast. This was during COVID. Nobody can travel. But there was a crew of, they're going through a turnaround, and the maintenance guys had 360-degree video camera capability. And they literally shot 360-degree video throughout the whole process for me. And we were able to have a very successful incident investigation by using some of these collaboration tools.
Pretty cool. Fantastic, Irene. With that, we have our first polling question on, what are the root causes that you have found for process safety incidents? So looks like we already have quite a number of comments already. I'll open it up for Aaron and Irene to comment on what you're seeing here.
Oh, there we go. So root cause. Yeah, open up. One thing that I'm seeing here, and Aaron is please highlight with me, is hazard, PHA or no PHA. This is part of the pre-work and understanding your process, especially if it's a chemical manufacturing process or general manufacturing processes. Have you thoroughly recognized the hazards ahead of time?
Yes, no, actually, in a couple slides, I'm going to be talking about an incident that had occurred because they had not done a process hazard analysis in the initial commissioning. And I actually first learned about this event years ago when I was first learning how to do a process hazards analysis. The other thing that stands out to me is no training. I have seen multiple times a new piece of equipment or a new process get rolled out. And, if it was more of a people hands-on process, there'd be no like change management implemented. If it was like an actual like technical piece of equipment that was rolled out, there was no actual training done with the operators that would actually be operating it from day to day. So I have seen that multiple times. And it's super important to have good SOPs around training and new equipment commissioning, as well as change management if you're going to be changing more of a business process.
So I think everyone, we're going to come back to this after this next after a few slides. So keep typing them in and we'll get an update. With that, we'll move on to the next section and the case studies. So Aaron?
All right, so this was actually the slide I was referring to with the process hazard analysis or lack of one. This was a really serious incident. So this was in December of 2007 in Jacksonville, Florida. T2 Laboratories had a runaway reaction and it essentially exploded the reactor and caused four deaths and over 32 injuries, and the facility was completely destroyed. From this causal tree, the main root cause that was found was that there was that runaway chemical reaction. Previous warnings had been ignored, and no RCA had been conducted. A couple other key issues in this causal tree: insufficient cooling, related but slightly different, oversized heating system. There were high critical chemical levels like MCPD and sodium, which contributed to the right conditions to have that runaway reaction. As well as there was there was pressure relief, but the pressure relief was not sufficient to handle that runaway reaction. And related to that, there was no design redundancy to take care of it if there was a runaway reaction. I think, click please. So this is an excerpt from the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigations Board. They did a very in-depth analysis, unfortunately, after the fact. I would recommend if you aren't familiar with this serious event, I would recommend going back and looking at their report. And then this quote on the right is from the local paper. In the first 10 times the plant was used, heat and pressure inside the reactor jumped unexpectedly 3 times. The explosion happened on the 175th batch, and that was also years later. So the owners had these warning signs. They had these near misses, according to Safety Board investigator Robert Hall, but the reaction was not to investigate what caused the problem. It was just to make another batch. So during commissioning, they had the same pressure jumps that were the warning signs. Again, they hadn't done a processed hazards analysis, which would have identified that there was this potential for a runaway reaction, and they could have addressed that with the equipment design. So if the RCA had been conducted earlier, there were the warning signs to detect that this disaster was a potential, and it could have been averted. So my main takeaway on this slide is that conducting an RCA for near misses and warning signs is crucial to prevent future disasters like this from happening.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at this slide, in the past 20, 30, 40 years, we have had some catastrophic disasters. Bhopal, that tragedy alone should have been enough to shake the industry. But then we had the Piper Alpha explosion in the UK in the North Sea. We had the Phillips 66 explosion in Pasadena, Texas. There was a refinery, the BP refinery, that explosion. There's a lot of information on that. Then we had the Deepwater Horizon. And if we think about the number of fatalities just going along, we know Bhopal was 2,000 fatalities, about 10,000 injuries. Piper Alpha was 167 fatalities. That back then was $850 million in property damage, but right now it's estimated to be nearly $2 billion. BP in Texas City, that was a vapor cloud explosion. That had 15 fatalities, 180 injuries. The Enjet Galveston vapor cloud explosion, that just happened a couple of years ago. That one alone had less than it had about 100 injuries or less, but there was major issues with hot work permits. Those are simple things that could be taken care of. And so these are not going away. And if you take a look at the item on the right, even in the last couple of years, you can see the trends are increasing. And so the question is why? And so why do these keep occurring? Are we just driving for production and deadlines versus safety? We've all heard of that one person who's like, nah, keep going. Are there root causes known, but we're not proactively managing it? So this is something that folks need to really think about, especially as they take this message back to their work areas, is how is their work area recognizing hazards and doing something about it to prevent disasters from occurring? So if you take a look at just the pure data there of the root causes and just analyzing those ones on the previous slide, the first piece there is process hazards analysis, leak and gas detection, whether they had the instrumentation, whether it was working or whether it was just ignored. Management of change. This is critical. So management of change, you have management of change of equipment, management of change of technology, and management of change of personnel. All of those are important. You can't just swap things out and not really understand, is there going to be an impact? Down to, is the difference in material in your gasket going to make a difference? Because it does. Your process major safety management systems, whether it's the plant layout, your process safety metrics, your plant design codes, that's absolutely critical. Don't put, the distillation column that has a blast radius of 100 yards right next to your control room and your lunchroom. Think about your plant layout. Your emergency response systems. Make sure that you are prepared in practice. You do tabletop drills and field drills. I remember doing a field drill back when I had 10 years experience in DuPont, and my job was to go out into the site and grab the chain from the mailbox and pull across the road to block off the road. And we found out, well, heck, it only goes halfway across the road, so that's not going to work. Or you're going to go and look for the fire blanket that's adjacent to the safety shower, and you find out, well, it's not in there. This is why you do field tests as well. Permission to work, hot work permits, making sure you have isolation and permits for maintenance. If you go into your control room, your maintenance room, there should be a lockout board that's very clearly marked and everyone knows exactly what's locked out, whose lock is on it, and what's happening. All of these are preventable. Not only are all these top ones here that are circled in that oval are things that are good to implement, and we have the technology to implement. But if we go back to that list of disasters, they were all preventable. Think about the tragedy that occurred in killing all of those people. We could have prevented it.
Thanks, Irene. And with that, we'll go back to the word cloud. And any additional thoughts here? Quite a bit of chatter here, which is fantastic. Any closing comments on this?
So we see no PHA, no training really popping up as being something more common, but new ones that came in here was new poor maintenance practices, leaking machines, lack of awareness. To me, those popped out as something new from the last round. What about you, Aaron? What are you observing?
I'm looking at poor maintenance practices and lack of preventative maintenance. And then I think that what goes with that is predictive maintenance too.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that pop up in doing causal trees as well. A lot of times it's, it could be operational discipline related, but I've also seen the system have just a ton of technical debt, and your maintenance system, if it's clunky and difficult to use, using it just becomes a kind of checkbox for the people that actually need it.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately they won't get the value out of it, and that can lead to poor maintenance practices like missing regular routine preventative maintenance.
So one learning too here is, as we talked about this for process safety incidents, but a lot of this is leverageable to other industries, whether it's the food safety industry, whether it's a customer facing industry, in retail or hotels, or you're developing software, is really make sure you have the operational discipline to really understand the process, understand the impact on the end user and the customer, and really being prepared.
Practice, practice, practice.
Yep.
Things that we don't have time for. Seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've seen over the years is making it a little bit more interesting, uh, positively, I'll say positively competitive in having a safe workplace,
Hmm.
as often worked when I've seen, even in those days at Covanta, I saw some of the leaders push for that. So I think that's,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think that really helps a lot, where everybody's coming to the table every meeting with any near miss situations. Those type of things are all very important things that leadership can do and
Hmm.
can make uh, a significant impact on this.
Yep.
We
And
could
making
talk for hours on this, but we're going to move on. This is in collaboration tools that we've been waiting for. So let's kick us off here, Aaron.
All right. Well, as Albert Einstein once said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. At least when I originally made this slide, he said it. There has been some debate on whether he actually said it or not. But regardless of who said it, this perfectly captures today's state of RCA processes at a lot of the companies I've worked Um, with a background in engineering, I've seen that there's been tons of change with how we do engineering. Even simple baseline stuff like doing calculations used to be done with a team of 10 engineers and a slide rule and a bunch of engineering paper. And today there's a piece of software that does it, and it's just one little feature inside that software, and one person, one engineer can work that. So why haven't we changed root cause analysis since the 1980s at a lot of these organizations? I see three main opportunities in this area. The first is cultural perception. So your RCA could be viewed as a formality for leadership. That's going to cause your teams that are actually boots on the ground to resolve issues first and fill out RCA forms later. Just filling out a report, and that's going to undermine the RCA process's true value. The second opportunity I see deals with facilitators. There's a lot of manual processes, especially in the pre-work. Building that problem statement, going to Gemba and gathering data. Facilitators waste time manually gathering a lot of that information and trying to coordinate with team members. And this is all ahead of the sit down in a conference room to actually do the RCA and dig into the root causes. A lot of these tasks could be streamlined with modern digital tools. And then finally, the third area I see is limited expert involvement. Irene's touched on this a whole lot. I've sat down in RCAs. Actually, it was a generator failure, and the first time we sat down with the entire team was missing a electrician and an electrical engineer. So there was no electrical expertise for a generator failure, and as you can imagine, we didn't get very deep into the root cause analysis and nowhere near where the actual root cause of the failures were. So that's really driven by an absence of remote collaboration tools. We have the tools out there beyond just using Zoom to include those experts.
So with that, we're going to cover this quickly. If you have a response, maybe just put it in the chat, make it quicker. On how often you complete an RCA. How long does it take you to complete an RCA from the time of the incident? I've seen these draw out 90 days before, 120 days, because just getting the right folks in the room, getting the sign off, being able to accomplish this in a short amount of time is often very difficult and challenging, as we've mentioned here. So, Aaron, your thoughts on this? What you've seen?
Yeah, I've actually been I've actually done RCAs with some organizations where if it was a high priority failure, they would put a cap on it, and that cap was 30 plus days,
Mhm.
which is it's too late. The ship has sailed at that point if it's
Yep.
truly a detrimental issue. I mean, it needs to be quick, and there needs to be a fast response, and it needs to be with that same structured methodology to dig into root causes. 14 days plus is too many.
We have a comment, containment implemented quickly is, of course, very important, as Irene pointed out. And then you can take your time to do the RCA and make sure it's done right. I think, yeah, we don't want to, I think the speed thing is a big thing, is if you're not doing it fast to get it done, you're doing it fast and making it complete. So you can take the actions, remedial actions, because if the RCA is not done, you're not taking any remedial actions, or you may not be.
And Jim, I think the key to that is making sure that the employees who are a part of the RCA team continue to have the avenue, set production goals aside, and to continue to have the avenue to work towards solving those root causes. Even if we ship off the first RCA and call it complete, right? You've just developed your countermeasures. You need to go revisit that in a couple of weeks and confirm that those countermeasures actually address the true root causes. And I've seen situations sometimes where once the report is shipped off to leadership, the RCA is done when it's really not.
The one thing I will say about taking the time to do it right, you're absolutely right there. Being that if you have to send things out for a metallurgist to analyze to a lab, that's going to
Yeah,
take a while to do that.
sure.
And waiting for those results is critical, because you find some surprises on how things went. We had an incident where it was a process incident where there were these high specialty metal boiler tubes in the energy from waste facilities that should have lasted 7 to 10 years, and they destroy them in 2 years. That's a couple $1 million thrown out right there. And it could have been worse. We didn't have a fire or another issue, but why did it happen? And waiting for that data and gathering the facts was really, really critical for us to go through the Y tree and understand that it wasn't just the material, it was how they were installed, it was the maintenance practices.
Good discussion. And I think that really leads well into the next slide, with Aaron leading us on how do we make this easier, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Owners.
So I think that the best way to think about modernizing your RCA approach and to solve some of those issues we talked about 2 slides ago, with the lack of subject matter experts, et cetera, is really this 3 separate phases: reactive, planning, and collaboration. So your reactive approach is that first initial hit, that containment. So there needs to be an immediate response to contain the issue. And there also needs to be a structured methodology that's easy to use. So I've seen tools like Logic and Taproot help accomplish that. They allow you to conduct kind of that first part of the RCA quickly, as well as it automatically documents it, so that information isn't lost. The second phase is planning. So this is where a lot of that pre-work and analysis goes into it. You're going on Gemba, data collection. The tool that we're actually building at enroute.io, and is currently available today, is a interview or polling tool for your RCA team. It's going to help you identify biases. It's going to create a custom facilitation plan based on those answers. And ultimately, it's going to give you a head start when you sit down to kick off that RCA event. It has some other features within it, like sentiment analysis and other machine learning techniques, which is going to help you capture unstructured data. That's really what it's about. It's about catching, the opinions, how people feel about root causes. And ultimately, you can use this to create a recommendation model for probable root causes and probable solutions, although that does take some effort to get to. And then the third phase is collaboration. So this is where we talked about how getting the right people in the room is super important to having a productive root cause analysis. You can't solve an electrical issue without an electrician or an electrical engineer. So remote collaboration is important. There's tools available like Mural and Miro, which are strictly whiteboard tools. And then you also have the AIM Institute, which has that and more. This is real-time collaboration, not just Zoom. I've seen RCAs conducted over Zoom, and when it comes time to do the brainstorming exercises, whether that's building a fishbone diagram, whether that's building a causal tree, or brainstorming countermeasures, the best way to do that is still sticky notes and a whiteboard. But the people on Zoom are not going to be involved in that, and they're going to drop out, and you're not going to get their participation. So using these tools like the AIM Institute, Mural, and Miro can ultimately help you do those brainstorming exercises collaboratively with the people over Zoom. So overall, if you combine this reactive approach, good planning that's been streamlined, and collaboration, having these remote collaboration options, you're going to be left with an AI-powered RCA process that's going to allow you to be efficient and have more impactful problem-solving sessions.
Thanks, Aaron. I think we do have a question here asking about how does the solution address the issues of getting the team aligned on the problem when you're skipping the beginning steps of RCA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of these tools are not meant to replace the RCA. So that team meeting, that RCA event where you're going through whatever steps you choose, whether it's DMAIC or PDCA, whatever your RCA process is, the team still needs to get together and run through that process. None of these teams replace it. But for example, with enroute.io, it's going to take that polling information that you got from your team ahead of that meeting, and it's going to use it to build a first draft of your 5W2H analysis. It's going to give you a recommended problem statement, but that isn't going to be your final problem statement. It's just a great starting point that has the input of the team already incorporated into it. So it's going to replace the need to prepare for that meeting as much. And let's say going through the defined stage of your RCA typically takes, 1 to 2 hours. It could cut that time in half, say 30 minutes to an hour, since you're not spending as much time trying to gather that information.
Thanks, Aaron. And with that, we'll move to the final section, the financial impact of implementing RCFA. A lot of this is focused on cost avoidance, and we'll get into that and the bottom line impact. So the first area is loss of revenue due to production, also your brand. So you may lose volume based on being down and not being able to deliver. So this can greatly impact you over the long term. The second is downtime, loss of production. Of course, you're going to be down, so you're going to lose production. Workman's comp, it's going to affect you sooner or later in insurance if you are deemed a high risk facility and you don't have these work practices. If you do have these work practices in place, you can actually go to your insurance company and say, we have these practices in place. Can we get a discount on our rates? So it can actually work in your favor. Overtime, again, overtime, you're going to have to make up that production loss. So now you have people making up for people missing and or the loss of production. And then the overtime for maintenance and operations. We all know there's a shortage of the right and enough maintenance people and ops people today. And that's where the struggle happens. It's kind of a push-pull there of, do we do the maintenance, but we need to run the plants? Do we have enough folks? So this is a real struggle that facilities are dealing with today. But in this case, if you do have an incident, then you're going to need more overtime by those folks that are already working very hard. And then you have the overtime of employees to make up for the person on disability, as we mentioned before. So there's a lot of places where you can find financial impact to this. And with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide on the financial impact opportunities and the enroute.ai enablement. So we'll kick off the first one, life and avoid injuries. And Aaron, you want to take this?
Yeah. So using this kind of modern approach to RCAs can absolutely help avoid the loss of life or injuries that can happen when you're running operations. So the main way to do this is by preventing false solutions to root causes. So as we saw on in the beginning of this presentation, Irene had a piece of data that said about 30% of a certain company's are 70% of their countermeasures didn't actually address the root cause. And that's something to be acutely aware of. And having these systems in place can help grade and rate how likely your root causes are to actually address your problem statement, and then how likely your countermeasure is to correctly address that root cause.
Thanks, Aaron. And we have a question in the chat. Irene, you want to take that?
So the question looks like, looking at root cause analysis in Kaizen through a wider lens, what is your view on the relationship between an organization's strategic house, strategic drivers, lean practices, tools such as root cause analysis, and enterprise risk management? So excellent question. And so if you think about it holistically, the operational excellence principles for an organization, and those apply to any type of business you're running. And wherever you are in your journey, you need to be looking at those 10 foundational principles. That really sets the stage for using these tools. If you have that thought process of operational excellence, of course, you're going to use root cause analysis and Kaizens as part of your how we do work all the time to make it better. Of course, you're going to use lean practice tools. Of course, you're going to always look at your risk management, whether it's process hazards risk management to a supply chain risk management, because as an operational excellence powerhouse of an organization, you want to be anticipating what's coming up on the horizon and being able to react appropriately. So thinking about these as critical tools in your toolkit are part of the process for operational excellence. So I like that question.
Yeah, we could talk for hours on that.
Another webinar or a chat over a glass of wine.
Yeah, we could
coffee.
just have a wrap on that. So another financial impact, reduce lost workday cases and restricted workday cases. So how do you overcome that, Aaron?
Yeah, so this goes beyond just lost workday cases and restricted workday cases. Really what this is getting at is beyond just making sure you're addressing the correct root cause, is ensuring that those root causes and the countermeasures you've developed to address them go into the SOPs. This is how you incorporate what you found in your root cause analysis into your organization. It needs to end up in the SOPs, and those SOPs need to be updated and reflective of what the team found. Jim, I think you're on mute.
Number of days unplanned shutdown. Moving
Yes.
on.
Yep. So identifying risk areas and adjusting daily work processes. So this is similar. Adjusting daily work processes is one step beyond the SOPs. So updating the standard work that your employees follow from day to day, as well as using what you found to identify additional risk areas. You've had this incident, whether it's a quality or a safety incident. Are there other places in your plants where you could expect to have a similar incident? And can we be predictive in anticipating that?
Thanks, Aaron. And maybe Irene, do you want to talk about this next one?
So insurance costs. So think about that. We had highlighted the incredible amount of money that was associated with personnel injuries. Insurance costs do increase as you're having more and more incidents within your company, and so you want to make sure that you're preventing the injuries in the first place by solving the root cause, fixing those standard operating procedures. And so these are simple fixes to prevent hurting people and prevent really impacting the bottom line of your company.
Thanks, Irene. And that fits well into the medical cost coverage, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right on board with that.
Yeah. Then we get to labor's relations. Irene, your thoughts?
So this is critical, especially if you are on a site that has poor labor relations or has a strong union involvement. You want to make sure that the voice of the union members are included in the process. And this is critical because, especially if it impacts the wage roll folks, you want to make sure that they have their presence involved. And then having that collaborative presence and voice, as well as making sure that you go into the blame game, but you're really driving to the root cause, that really improves the relationship between management and the union membership.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron, you want to comment on the LLM assistant?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does tie in with the community relations and the labor relations. So LLM is just a subset of AI and machine learning. And what all of these tools ultimately allow you to do is capture unstructured data that exists and we kind of subconsciously know and act on. But with AI and machine learning, we can capture that. Like for example, you can pull a lot more people with a surveying tool than you can fit in a conference room to contribute in an RCA that way. So you can have a broader audience contribute into your RCA. And ultimately, this data is going to allow you to create things like those recommendation models I talked about earlier, where it's going to be able to put a grade to your root causes and a grade to your potential solutions. And then over time, as you've built the processes in place to collect this data, you're going to have this big database of valuable data related back to this. And with an LLM, the advantage is you can train it on that big database, a database that's too big for you and I to just sit there and scroll through and pull information out of. But it can be trained on that information, and ultimately it'll be able to give improvement recommendations to your SOPs and standard work based on data like near misses and sentiment analysis of people during an RCA.
So before we leave this, do you have any, maybe each of you could share how going through this, you've actually been able to stave off an incident and gain a direct result from this?
So I'll talk, and especially it's very measurable when you're looking at equipment reliability issues that lead into a process safety. As you determine what's causing an issue with a piece of equipment, you can actually look at the trend analysis and run that control chart to see how statistically you have dropped the frequency of either errors or the frequency of vibration or the amount of times that it goes out of the control limits after you implement your changes. And that statistical measurement is and not only demonstrating that statistical change and then communicating that has not only staved off the incidents from occurring, but it also helps build the case for lean, build the case for these type of tools, and build the case for using data to really drive decision making.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Yes, and similar to that, I won't talk about any one specific RCA, but on one of the teams I had worked with previously, we got into this iteration of doing an RCA and whether it was quality or safety, and all of the equipment issues we had found and dug into, we used that data to essentially guide our predictive maintenance program that we were developing. So, in any predictive maintenance program, one of the first things that they kind of recommend is, let's look at temperature and vibration, and we'll go straight, we'll put it on all your pumps. Um, well, we had one more pumps than we wanted to put sensors on, but also there were other types of equipment we were more concerned with and was more critical to our operations. So, what we had uncovered in those RCAs was essentially the starting point for what equipment we included into our predictive maintenance program first.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. I think it's always, where do you start and where do you spend money and where don't you spend money and time on? And these types of things will help you in many of those activities and decisions, key decisions for the organization.
Yeah.
With that, I want to thank everyone. Hopefully we addressed all the deliverables there that we set off for in the beginning of this webinar, shared with a lot of information. Next webinar, we'll be getting deeper into how to engage your employees to alleviate operational pains and reduce risk, because it's really a cultural thing, as we discussed here. It starts with the folks right there on the ground and getting them to provide feedback and ownership of a good, safe environment. And with that, closing comments, Irene.
So hopefully this enlightened folks a little bit on how this tool can not only prevent future losses, but really help build an organization, not only from a productivity, but from an organizational strength point of view. I appreciated the in-depth questions and participation from the folks on the line. So thank you very much for that.
Aaron?
Yep. I would also like to thank everybody for joining and the participation and all the questions. I really enjoyed this conversation. If there's one big takeaway, I hope I got across to everyone, it's that even if you've had a bad taste in your mouth from maybe a clunky RCA process, it doesn't have to be that way. And there are ways to make it more efficient and productive and truly make it a powerful tool that your organization can use.
Thank you, Aaron. And I want to thank Aaron and Irene for their time and effort in putting together this webinar. And we look forward to you joining in future webinars. If you have any comments on this webinar and what you'd like to see more or less of, please feel free to reach out to us or put it in the comments in the survey at the end. And we're looking to serve you. This is such an incredibly important topic that often is overlooked and assumed. And we all know what happens when we assume on mistakes. So with that, we'll leave you, and you have a great week ahead and safe one at that. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.